Hello and welcome to Oak Road Hatter, where I'm joined by Jamie Castle and Adam Driscoll as we look ahead to the visit of Hull City on Saturday, plus talk a bit about Jamie's England travels. But before all that, we've got 3 chances to win some of our new Oak Road Hatter merch. The first chance is subscribe to Oak Road Hatter on YouTube, like and comment on any video published between Sunday the 3rd of November and Friday the 22nd of November. That's this Friday and the day of the Hull City preview pod. You have 1 chance to enter per episode, so if you like and comment on several episodes between those dates, you can multiply your chances of winning. The second chance is follow Oak Road Hatter on Twitter or X. Like and repost the competition tweet. This will be pinned on our profile. And tag 3 people in the comments of the post. Finally, place an order between Sunday the 3rd of November and kick-off for Luton versus Hull City at 3 p.m. on Saturday the 23rd of November. And multiple orders means multiple entries, so make sure you've got in with a chance of entering. But we're going to get straight into the podcast. And Jamie, how are you doing? You've been on your travels again with England.
Yeah, it's the usual England klaxon back from Athens and then Wembley on Sunday. It was good. It was an interesting trip to Athens and then back to see England face Mark McGuinness. That was also interesting. Unfortunately for him, 2 games in a row where he's conceded 5 goals, which is obviously going to massively boost his confidence, right? But yeah, overall a great trip, and now don't know where's next because the draw for the World Cup qualifiers is going to be in about 2 or so weeks, which I look forward to.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more about your trip to Athens because I know it wasn't smooth sailing for England fans.
No. There's something I put out on Twitter that actually got picked up by the Sun, and I was name dropped in the Sun for a post I put on social media, which was pretty interesting. Basically along the lines of 2,000 England fans get into the stadium 90 to 120 minutes before kickoff to sort of join this queue to 3 gates as like a pre-turnstile gate where they were doing ticket checks, which basically took ages to get in. People started pushing, and then the Greek police thought, yeah, let's go into that group with riot shields and pepper spray. So that was interesting. Thankfully, I wasn't affected. I managed to put my face inside my jumper that I was wearing to sort of avoid the pepper spray. But yeah, seeing people with pretty red eyes was not a great sight to see. So yeah, thankfully it doesn't seem like there was anyone seriously injured, albeit walking around Athens the next day, you could see the odd black eye or mark on the head from someone that was obviously involved in that situation. So yeah, not nice to see. Unfortunately, it's something that certainly football fans are thankfully in this country we don't see anything severe too often, but but both England fans and clubs that are in Europe that go overseas, it's something that we see all too frequently. So yeah, not good. We're treated a bit like cattle at times, but the FA they're addressing it, and there's the FSA and all the relevant bodies. So yeah, interesting, not great, but 2 good results for England, and looking forward to Tommy Tuchel now.
And Adam, welcome back. It's a slightly different week off for you. No pepper spray.
No pepper spray. I actually had a little trip, went to Spain for 5 nights with the family and landed just as we were finishing our capitulation against Borough. So it was a nice time to look at that, say a few swear words, and basically turn the phone off and forget about it for for a few nights. So yeah, back and refreshed, and let's see what we can do in the next few weeks.
Yeah, you were pretty lucky to miss having to watch that game. If you haven't listened already, check out mine and Lewis's thoughts from that game because yeah, it was a rough one to say the least. But we've moved on from that, and we're going to be looking ahead to the visit of Hull City, and they come to Kenilworth Road this Saturday for a 3 p.m. kickoff, which is fun because we don't see many of them. They're pretty bad form, to be honest. Hull, they have been up and down, mainly down since they sacked Liam Rosenior, which I think a lot of people thought was a bad decision, and they haven't won any of their last 5, Jamie, losing the last 2.
Yeah, no, I think they're in a bit of a tricky spot. I think I agree. I think secondly, Mazzini was pretty stupid. I think ironically, obviously, don't want to get into too much Rob talk certainly at the minute. But if he was to go, he'd certainly be someone on my list that I would like Luton to look at. So to sack a manager and bring in um someone that obviously isn't really used to the level in Tim Walter. I think there was a lot of positivity. I think it was at Hamburg, was that previously, and sort of the football that he was playing with Hamburg, I think was apparently really good. Not that I know an awful lot, but that's the risk that sometimes doesn't pay off. I mean, it's paid off for Sunderland bringing in the Briss, but for Hull, it's not paid off too much. So yeah, they're in a bit of a tricky spot. Um, it's a really good team. I think they've got some really good defenders and some really good midfielders. I think that their forward line, I think, leaves a lot to be desired at times. I think Mason Burstow's really young. They lost Estupinian, I think, to a side in Mexico in the summer, and they're now playing João Pedro. No, not that one, thankfully. It's just a 32-year-old Italian instead. So yeah, their forward line is really hard to gauge, but I think in terms of their strengths, I think defensively they're really strong. They've got good options at fullback. Obviously, Coyle is the one that sort of is known to most outside of Luton in terms of he's sort of captained them for a while. But I guess from our perspective, they've got both Ryan Giles and Drame as well. So that they're two players that are very familiar. One probably had a greater impact than the other. Obviously, Drame was the starting wing back in that side that got promoted. Ryan Giles, obviously, I personally think was mismanaged, but again, probably not one for this episode. And then defensively, centre halves, obviously they've lost Jacob Greaves, who's gone on to Ipswich and seems to be doing really well, but they've still got Jones and Hughes, who I think are two really promising young centre backs that probably at some point will both make it to the top flight themselves. So I think it's going to be a really cagey game. I think their strengths are definitely more in the defence than going forwards. Whereas I think our strength is actually going forwards rather than defensively. So I think that would be a really interesting matchup.
Yeah, Adam, Jamie's obviously mentioned um, Cody Drama and Ryan Giles there. Sorry, completely escaped my mind, which says a lot about what he did for Luton during his time. Last couple of games, it looks like Drame's been actually favoured at that left back position, which is interesting because Ryan Giles was so impressive during his time at Middlesbrough, but it's clear that maybe Tim Walter doesn't rate him as highly as others do.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that much of them in all honesty, so I'm not sure like how much like tinkering they've been doing. I think with Giles, it was always a case of like how good defensively is he. I think there was never any doubt, and we saw that at Borough how good he was going forward, almost playing like almost like left forward really. They're always suspect defensively, and maybe that's something that the management team there have picked up on, and they want that little bit more cover defensively. I think Drame's great going forward, but is also more of a solid defender than Giles, and we can judge that fairly well, given we've seen probably enough of both of them to make that call. So, but yeah, I agree with Jamie. I think their team. I don't know a lot about their forwards. Midfield, Casey. I think they've got Casey Palmer, who's quite a good established Championship midfielder. So whether he can give them that bit of control in midfield, we'll see on Saturday. But I'd certainly look at it and think it's a game to be aggressive for us, attacking. Have a bit of intent because the matchup should be us being on the front foot and trying to get through that defence that they've got.
Yeah, you mentioned that you don't know much about their forward line there. It's a forward line that I'm pretty sure most Hull fans won't be sure what they're going to see either, as they're now without Liam Miller and Mohamed Baloumi, who are both long-term absentees for them. Um, another player that may come in and probably will come in is Abu Kamara, Jamie, and he's one that we were linked with, if not solidly linked with, over the summer. How much of a threat could he cause if he does prove to play?
Yeah, he was the guy from Norwich, right? I think someone that we were fairly heavily linked with late on in the window. Yeah, I think was it Pompey he was at previously? I think in that League
Yeah,
One
he was on loan.
season in that season for them. So I think certainly someone that can impact the level, and I think Pompey fans would have loved him back. So I guess that shows something, right? That they would have loved him back and would have started for them in the league. So I think he's definitely sort of at the level. Norwich fans maybe thought he had a bit of an attitude problem in terms of he came back and thought he was God's gift, and were fairly happy to see the back of him. So not doubting any ability that he might have. I think probably he should come in and start for them, given the other options that Hull have. Right, I think Liam Miller was a great signing. Was someone that I would have loved to have seen at Luton. But given he's out and injured, probably someone that comes in. But I know they've got this really sort of heavy Turkish centric sort of ownership, and they've got quite a few Turkish players. And again, would not fess up to knowing anything about them whatsoever. Which makes it, I guess, a hard read for us. I'm sure that the staff behind the scenes are doing their homework, but yeah, from our perspective, a very very difficult team to guess. There's one player that I know of in terms of Puerto. I know he's a bit on loan from Leverkusen, but again, he's just an academy product that clearly must have something, given that he's at Leverkusen in terms of his parent club. But to come into the Championship and really impact, yes, sometimes it pays off, but others, I think inconsistency is probably a very prevalent thing that we see amongst these sort of signings into this level. So hopefully they're bad against us and save any sort of readability for future.
Yeah, it's been a real tough season, we'll say, for Hull fans, and a frustrating summer. I've heard from a lot of different outlets and sources with the number of players they let go, key players they let go, the likes of Estepinian, Seri, Philogene, and Jacob Greaves. And also you can add Ozan Tufan in there, who was their main, probably their main threat and the biggest player in that Turkish contingent. They all went, and they didn't really replace them properly, and they've been struggling since. And they actually find themselves 19th in the table, so not quite as low as us, but they are level on points with us, and it's a must-win for us going into this one, Adam, especially following that 5-1 defeat to Middlesbrough, which was an absolute shocking result. How important is it for not just for Luton but Edwards in particular to get something from this game?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. I mean, again, it's a home game, but it's a home game against a team that are wherever they are, like 19th or not far off us. So um, we might look at it and go, it's the 20th of November. There's loads of points to play for, but it's a game that could shape up the season a bit. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a must win. In terms of for Edwards, I know we're not going to go into it that much because obviously it's been very quiet, but clearly he stays for now. So every win he can get gives him a bit more of a grace period, a bit more leeway with us fans as well, and rightly so. I'm not going to criticise after a win. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be big for him to get that confidence into the squad, and we win on Saturday. It's just about, can we start piecing wins together as well? And I know we've got tough games coming up very very soon, but it is certainly a big game for club and for Rob Edwards.
Yeah, I think that the movement in that pendulum now for both us as a squad, team, club in the league, and also Rob is pretty massive, right? I think if he wins this game, it's like, oh, okay, fine. At home again, we're looking good. We've got sort of more points on the board, and maybe that's something that we just need to settle for this year, is in terms of winning our home games and maybe being a bit abject away. But then again, at the same time, if we lose, and it's like, well, God, we've not only lost 5-1 to Borough, but we've lost home to Hull. And I think, whilst again, I don't want to keep using the phrase must win, because it seems like we've used it for the last 2 months this season, right? But it comes a time where how bad can it get? and then also like then how many games does he need to sort of swing back into favour? So I think every game right now is so massive, and as Adam alluded to, I think Leeds away and Norwich away as our next two. They're that you can't get a much harder pair of fixtures back to back. So if we do lose this one, we're going to those two games, and who knows, Luton being Luton, we'll probably go away to Leeds and win, right? But yeah, I think to lose this game on Saturday to go into those two games is really sticky territory, I think. So yeah, okay, we'll use the phrase must win, but I think it's super important, not only for Rob but just for us as a club, because yeah, there's not many points between us and above or below. I think if we win this, we can go up as high as 15th, but if we lose, then we could technically be second bottom, I think. So that just shows how much 3 points means at this stage of the season.
And it's a Luton team that will be tough to predict, just based off what we've seen recently. Obviously, Edward said he would rotate for the game against Middlesbrough, and he did, but he made some changes that really surprised a lot of people, bringing in the likes of Cauley Woodrow from the start. Do you expect to see a much more familiar-looking Luton side, albeit with questions over Alfie still after he went off in the game before Middlesbrough, Jamie?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we'll largely revert to that side against Cardiff. Obviously, yeah, pending Doughty, but I'm sure we can do some movements. Be that Bell left wing back or Hashioka there instead. So yeah, I definitely expect to see us revert to that side that played Cardiff. I hope Doughty's fit. He did put something on Instagram where he put sort of training photos, but who knows whether that was sort of current or past. So I think that the midfield might look a bit different. I think Finn just pointed out that Clark's suspended for the game, so that's definitely a change in there. For me, I think Baptiste has to be it. So Baptiste and Kraus, and then whether you keep Chong as like a 10 or whether you have a bit more structure to midfield. So yeah, we've definitely still got options. I think the worst of the injury issues are over, obviously pending Doughty, whether that's long term or not. But yeah, I definitely think we should go back to the sort of the more normal lineup that we've seen more often than not.
And you mentioned there Baptiste hopefully coming into the side. He is one player who's been out of the starting lineup because of injury, but can come in and help really change things, Adam.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it was the last home game. He came on at half time and was really front footed, and I was impressed. I think it was probably his best performance for us so far. So there's so much more to come from him, though, and we spoke about this on one of the other pods. I think we've maybe seen 50% of what he can do, and a lot of that will be fitness. Like, yes, he's playing, but is he 100%? Clearly, he's not. So have we been able to build him up to be closer to that over the last 2 weeks? You'd hope so. And also, like other players as well, you'd hope that they're a lot closer to like full fitness than they may have been so far this season. So I tend to agree with Jamie. I think we'll see a strong team, and I would agree in terms of getting Baptiste in there from the start.
Do you think the travel that players have had with their national sides will have anything to do with team selection, Jamie? Because we had 4 players away with senior national teams. Uh, Funnily enough, they were all away on a different continent. So that was Amari Bell, Hashioka, Nakamba, and who was the
McGuinness.
last one? And McGuinness. Obviously, McGuinness was very close to home, so there'll be no concerns over him coming in. But someone like Bell or Hashioka, who have been quite far away, will be only returning back quite late and may get limited time on the pitch compared to other players. Is that something you can see affecting the side?
Um, I think it's sort of there's two arguments, right? We got one, yes, they've travelled far, um, but then the others, I think, well, but then they've played minutes, they've kept their match fitness. I mean, I think Ashoka played, if not both games in their entirety, played sort of like the vast majority of minutes. I think it was in China, or was it on Monday? I think he played his game on Monday in China, so he will certainly get home in time. He's probably home around now, sort of light training Thursday, then into full training Friday before Saturday, right? So it's not an awful schedule. Like I'm sure he can manage it. He's young. I'm sure he flew back business class or first class or whatever. So I'm sure he was well looked after. Um, Nakamba, I think for him getting minutes is a good thing. I think that's exactly what he needed. So yes, he might have travelled to Africa, but he needed two games and to be captain the side as well, which obviously would give him a lot of confidence. And then Amari Bell probably is the one that I think probably is a bit of a question mark because he's been injured so recently, and yeah, I think Bell's the one that it probably might affect the most. But then he's experienced enough now to be able to look after his body. I'm sure he's got his recovery down to a T now. So I would expect certainly two of the three to come in. Obviously Nakamba maybe rather than Kraus or Clark, but I would expect both Bell and Hashi to start.
Yeah, I think most Luton fans will want to see both of those players, if not all Luton fans, will want to see both of those players come into the starting lineup just based on their performances before that Middlesbrough game. I think Hashioka in particular has been really impressive recently since he's moved to right wing back, Adam. Um, Another player I wanted to ask you about is Elijah. Obviously, celebrated a milestone with Luton recently in terms of his appearances, and he's a player that has stepped up a bit more recently, but there's still questions being asked over the output of that front two.
Yeah, there is. I fully expect him to start with Morris. I think I know we've been very inconsistent, or maybe even consistently rubbish, but that's another argument. But I think a lot of us would agree that they are our focal point playing together, and the games that we have played well, you know, probably Watford and Sunderland. They were they were the focal point, weren't they? They played well together. So everything we do that seems to work is, for me, revolves around those two. So I'd fully expect them to see. I'd fully expect to see those two starting together, and yeah, Woodrow back on the bench.
We're going to do some score predictions in a moment, but before then, I just wanted to talk about one more thing related to Hull, and that is Oscar Zambrano. Obviously, there was a lot of talk about us being linked with him on multiple occasions, first in January and then obviously over the summer, but we didn't decide to go and get him or Hull beat us to him. But in the last week or so, it's come out that he is now facing a potential 2-year suspension for doping. Do you think that's something the club were actually aware of, Jamie, and they've done well to avoid actually bringing him in?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they must have done their sort of their research on it. I know there was some debate in the press because he sort of, I think, sort of appealed his innocence and said it was a mistake, etc. But they must have done their diligence and spoken to agents and people that are probably close to the situation and would have flagged it as a pretty high risk. I think it wasn't definite, but it was certainly high risk that it could have happened. So yeah, I definitely think that probably was the number one deal breaker in terms of why we didn't get him in the summer. So yeah, I think obviously we've turned our attentions elsewhere. It seems like Lamine Darbo might be the one that we went for instead, and based on his performances in Sweden, it seems like he's going to be massively missed by fans of AIK. So looking forward to getting him in. Obviously, he's finished the season technically now, but we can't register him until January. So gives him, I'm sure, probably get a few weeks off, and he might come to Luton sort of mid December and start his training.
Yeah, he helped AIK into European places on the final day of the season with 3 assists on that last game of the season. So he certainly had an impact. And I think he was nominated for Player of the Season. I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure on that, but there's a lot of excitement around him, him coming in and potentially getting straight into that side when he arrives. I'm going to do some score predictions now, and unless there's any big changes you're expecting in terms of lineup, which jump in if you think there will be before we go to those score predictions. If not, Adam, I'll start with you.
That is a very good question. I do think we'll win. I think we will win. I think it will ease a bit of pressure. And I think, yeah, if the 2 week break hasn't given people an opportunity to maybe reassess their expectations of the season, I know for me personally it has. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to go for a 2-0 win. Slightly routine, I would say. Maybe not the best performance, but I do think we'll win, and I'll go 2-0.
Yeah, I think we're going to win. Sorry, Jamie, I'm jumping in before you because I don't want to lose out on these scores again. I also think we'll win, but I do think we'll concede. Even though Hull haven't been amazing going forward, we've looked questionable in defence on a number of occasions. So I think we're going to win 2-1, but I think it'll be a fairly comfortable 2-1. Jamie?
No, I'm going to match Adam. I had 2-0 in my mind before Adam mentioned. I think, yeah, we've not looked great, but I think Hull on a bad spell of form. I think a forward line that might be a little bit questionable. Yes, obviously we joke about McGuinness and conceding 5 for Ireland and 5 for Luton before that, but clearly it was a good camp for him. Obviously he got I think his first start for them, and clearly a good experience to play against Harry Kane at Wembley. So that I think will certainly boost his confidence a little bit, given that he was in that team for Ireland and sort of playing for his country helps. Obviously Mengi was for the 21s as well, so that's I think just all round some real good sort of confidence. Clear the head, sort of just get away from Luton for like 10 days and clear their heads. I think is super important. So I think we'll win. I think we'll win 2-0, and hopefully the start of not necessarily a massive rise to the table, but just a bit more positivity.
So 2-0 from both of you and 2-1 for me. We'd love to know your score predictions to everyone listening. So let us know either in the comments or tweet us or message or at us on Blue Sky. We're on Blue Sky now, so look for us on there and let us know your score predictions as well for the whole City game. We're going to go to a quick break now, but quickly, don't forget to check out our merch on the Oak Road Hatter website. 25% of the profits go to Luton Food Bank, so there's a really good reason to get involved and get something from our shop. And there's some really cool products on there as well, which I'm sure Adam and Jamie can both attest for. And we might have some new stuff coming in the not too distant future, but we can't reveal any of that just yet. But when we get back, we'll be answering some of your questions on Twitter and on Blue Sky. Welcome back to Oak Road Hatter, where I'm still joined by Jamie and Adam, and we're going to be answering some of your questions on Blue Sky and on Twitter. And the first one is from Ben Jack Thomas, and he says, for all the Edwards outlaw, who do you think is a viable, available, and preferable option at this point? So, Jamie, I'm going to come to you first on that one.
Yeah, I think it's a fair comment. I think firstly on the Edwards outlet, I guess point. I think I've definitely made it known, certainly maybe not on air but off air, that we should only get rid of Edwards if there is someone that we deem to be a viable replacement. I don't want to be having 4 to 6 weeks of an interview process and sorting through the candidates and having in the meantime, be it Carl or Trollope or Foley as some sort of interim manager. I don't want that situation. You might as well just keep Edwards in post. I think that's the first point that I'll make. In terms of viable, available, preferable, I mean, I think Mark Robins probably is the one that is the most obvious one. I personally, I think I would have him over Edwards just for a bit of a switch up. I think sometimes some fresh minds can help, but for me, I'm not fully fully on board with Robins if he was to come in. Obviously, if he was, I'd get behind him. It seems like Coventry are appointing Frank Lampard, which is an interesting one. So there's certainly going to be some candidates out there that may be bigger names. I think lots of talk of Ruud van Nistelrooy or Lee Carsley. I think both of those may be without reach. But still, I think viable options for top level of Championship, bottom level of Premier League. I think typical Luton would look to like the lower levels. I think Skabala has been a name that's been mentioned previously. Would he be available? I don't know. I think lots of talk of if Skabala stays at Lincoln, maybe they get up to the Championship themselves. I don't know where his mind would be at, but I think there's certainly going to be options. I think Coventry had 80 plus applicants, and yeah, I think we're equally attractive to a manager that wants to cut their teeth, be it as like it could be a sort of a second in charge in the Prem, or a coach somewhere. You sort of look at Leicester last year, got Maresca from City, and yeah, would we achieve someone like that in terms of the equivalent now being like a number 2 or number 3 at a Premier League club? I don't know. I think there's certainly going to be options out there. So I wouldn't necessarily rule out saying Edwards, sort of Edwards has to stay because there's no one out there, or no one viable or available or preferable. But equally, I think you have to do your due diligence. And as I think I mentioned in the previous tweet, I think it'd be pretty incompetent right now if Gary Sweet's not got a list of 2, 3, 5 candidates that he would be ringing up, that them or their agents, should he need to pull the trigger.
Adam, I'll come to you because I mean it's fair to say you've been fairly vocal compared to Jamie in terms of your thoughts on the Edwards situation. So, are there any viable or preferable options for you at this stage?
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm never vocal. But yeah, there are. I think I do agree on the whole. You need to have a short list. You can't just pull the trigger on Edwards and then have no idea. I think really it comes down to how ambitious the club would be in that scenario, and it's obviously all hypothetical. But I'd like to think that our ambitions of our next manager stretch beyond where we've been previously in terms of looking down the EFL. Um, and yeah, for me, a real statement of ambition would be someone like Van Nistelrooy. And people might watch and go, well, why? What's he done? But you know, as far as my knowledge is concerned, he's PSV to second. He's had a good stint with Man United. He's also got stature in the game. He's a name in the game more recently, in the more recent sort of last 20 years or so. So I think for me, immediately commands that respect. And someone like him will have different ideas of football philosophy, which yes, it goes away from probably the Luton mold, but sometimes you have to take a risk. And it's been pointed out on socials that we're not a club to take a risk like that, but it was a risk when we brought Nathan Jones back. Um, it was a risk when we appointed Rob Edwards after a average spell at Watford, even though we know what they're like. So we've taken these risks before, and more recently they've worked. And it's not a guarantee that it would work, but at some point you have to take a risk and start to change your philosophy and your ambitions. And for me, Van Nistelrooy would be that. To add to that, my sort of second choice, I think, would probably be someone, probably between Carsley and Robbins. And I know we've sort of mentioned the same names here, but Carsley's just cut his cloth in the 21s. He stepped up to England and done pretty well. And I think someone like him, having those recent experiences again, might give us that slightly different mindset of this is how we want to shape the club and the way we play, um, and the way we want to be as well. So I would like to see us, if the scenario comes, change our approach a little bit, be bold, be brave, take a risk, and go after uh, someone like a Van Nistelrooy that will probably outgrow us, but in a positive, in a positive way.
I mean, there's plenty of discussion there. I'm sure people have plenty of opinions on those ideas. The next question comes from Mike Fanning, and he says, Pelly has been an absolute legend for us over the years, but in my opinion was never top 6 championship level. Now that we're clearly in a relegation battle, I think he should start against Hull on Saturday, then rest him on Wednesday against Leeds in game 2 of another tough 3-game week. Thoughts? And Adam, I'll come to you first on that one.
I think it's a fair point. I know Pelly's had a bit of a bashing in terms of like what he offers these days, but I think he also reminded us what he can do. I think he was it the Watford game that he came on, or there was a game that he came on and really put himself about and looked bang up for it, and he looked like the Pelly of old. Um, so I don't think it's a particularly bad suggestion, and especially given that our midfield isn't exactly dominating games and setting the league alight. I think it is the sort of game where you look at it and go, we need to keep everybody fit. Like we need to get minutes into people. And so, do you go with that on Saturday? And then you've got Kraus, Nakamba, Baptiste, etc., Clark back for those like bigger games, if you like. So, yeah, I think Mike makes a pretty good point there, and I wouldn't be against seeing that if that was revealed on Saturday.
Jamie, have you got any thoughts on that one?
I think for me it's a bit more difficult. I think I love Pelly. I think he's an absolute legend. He's our Ricky Hill, right? I think he's deserves all the praise that he's got over his stint at Luton Town, and an absolute legend, like stature at power court levels of stuff, right? But I think it's tough when I feel like we've just moved on now. I think we've obviously got Kraus, who is I love Kraus. He's amazing. Baptiste is clearly of a better level. I think for all the slating that Clark's got, I think Clark technically is better, and I think he's definitely ahead of Pelly in the pecking order. Nakamba likewise. I think that there's enough bodies there now where I just think Pelly is sixth, seventh, eighth down the pecking order. We've got Lamine Darbo coming in January, so that's another body that will probably be ahead of him. And if I'm being honest, it's probably the other side of the road where actually in January, if a decent offer came in, or if an opportunity for Perry to go out on loan to a top League One side came in, maybe we join his mates at Charlton. I think it's something that the club would take. Which, yeah, it hurts me to say because I think I've loved his spell at Luton, and I think he's been one of the highlights of the past decade. But I think time moves on, and I think, yeah, it comes a time where he gets phased out of the squad, and I think this season is it.
How important do you think he is behind the scenes?
Massive, yeah. Like there's absolutely no doubting his positivity behind the scenes. So you can see everyone loves him. Like you see all the videos in training, he's massive, and for that reason, yes, I'll keep him around this season. But uh, there comes a time where you need to let him go. You need to replace his his sort of his attitude and I mean that attitude in a positive way. You need to replace his positive attitude around the dressing room. You can't stay around forever, right? So there comes a time. So I think this season is the time where he just gets phased out, and yeah, that's hard to say, but I just think that's the nature of it.
We're going to touch on a different position now. And JP Asher says, we have looked shaky both up front and at the back. Which is it most important for us to strengthen? Or do you think the current players are up to scratch ability wise and the problem is something else? And Jamie, I'm going to go to you on that.
I think it's structure in midfield. I think overall our players are good enough. They're certainly good enough, at least top half championship, right? They're definitely not relegation battle players in the championship. I think defensively we've got the players. I think offensively we've got the players. I think even midfield we've got the personnel, but I just don't think the structure is quite working. I think in going back to Ben's question, I think there's a second question in there about playing the Canberra as a six and then playing more sort of dynamic eights ahead of him. I think it's a fair point. I think you sort of did that with Nakamba in the championship season last time. I don't know why he's reverted to a sort of a midfield two of a 10. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but I just think there's just an issue with that midfield. It's just not helping out the rest of the team. It's not protecting the back line, A, and it's not getting the ball to the front line, B. And I think it like that ultimately is the job of a midfield, and I just don't think it's doing it well enough. And that isn't a personnel like dig. I think that's just a tactical dig, and I think that for me is probably the key reason why I think that there's a bit of lost faith in Edwards. I think tactically he's just sticking with the same thing that just isn't working. When he's changed it enough in games to a different setup, be it like a 4-4-2, or he's changed it to a 6 and 2-8s, and it's just worked better. But he seems to keep reverting to this sort of midfield 2 and a 10, which just isn't working. So of course you always look to strengthen, but I don't think that is the key reason or the key thing that we need to improve results.
And I think that question on tactics and sort of staff brings us to this next one from Paul Sparks. And Adam, I'm going to come to you on this one. If you disagree with it, let me know because I've got questions over it as well. He says, "Is there a member of the backroom staff responsible for set pieces? If so, is he stealing a living? Is putting all eggs in the Alfie Dirty basket a wise move when all too often he is unable to beat the front man?" I mean, there's a lot to that question, so I think if you
Yeah.
unpack it piece by piece, maybe.
Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, Alan McCormack was our set piece coach. and he's went to Orient. I've no idea as to whether we've replaced internally. I haven't seen any like external facing announcement in terms of a new one coming in. So I'm imagining someone within the structure has picked that up. That answers the first bit. Is the person stealing a living? Well, look, I mean, let's not. I won't be too critical, but with our set pieces have led to a whole load of nothing this season. But I think there's a lot of that. A lot of that is, yes, it'll be down to what's happening on the training ground in terms of that movement. Like, do we have routines? But yeah, it's not worked, and a lot of that also is down to the deliveries from Doughty, because they've not been to the level that we've seen last season and before. So yeah, I tend to agree with the whole eggs in a basket thing. I actually thought when Baptiste came on the other week, I know he put one onto the roof of the net down our end at the Kenilworth Road end, but having that right-footed in-swinger was nice to see. Bit of variation. You know, we need more than one routine. If the opposing team are constantly defending an outswinger and they get their head on it, the ball's back on the halfway line. So I do think we need to mix it up, and we need to make use of other players, particularly right-footed players, to keep everyone guessing, and give ourselves a bit more chance of having success from those set pieces. So yeah, I think I've dissected all those bits and given an answer to that.
Jamie, have you got any
Yeah,
other thoughts on that?
yeah. I think first of all, on the staff responsible, I think Edward said in one of his interviews that it's now sort of been divvied up across the staff that were sort of already involved anyway. Yes, McCormack was leading on it, but I think that there was other members of staff like Pilkington and Foley, etc., that were involved. I think it's incredibly harsh in terms of the way our set pieces are looked at. I think in terms of chances created from set pieces, I think we're up there in terms of the stats. In terms of set pieces that result in a shot, I think firstly, I think that's the key stat that you look at in terms of the set pieces themselves. And I think all this talk of sort of beating the front man, I think yeah, it's so frustrating when the front man heads it away, etc. But the alternative is you just loop it into the penalty spot, and then it sort of, again, I think those sort of corners themselves fizzle out into nothingness. I think you forget that, yes, set pieces are super important, but the number of corners across the leagues that happen that actually result in goals is so few and far between. Like it's not a common, or it's not a high percentage conversion rate in terms of a corner or an advanced free kick to a goal. I agree in terms of the in swinger. I think Doughty on the left hand side is better than Doughty on the right hand side. I think that is probably the thing that I would change in terms of when it comes onto the right hand side. You have a right footed player, and I think Baptiste is the option. I think Baptiste should start in the team anyway for his play, but I think as another reason is because of set pieces as well. So that's probably something that I would change, is in terms of is making them both in swingers, just because I think that given how much pace we tend to fizz the ball in with, and sort of we try and keep it a pretty flat set piece, that having an in swinger means that the flight of the ball is always going towards goal, and all it takes is a bit of a deflection to go towards goal. Whereas if it's an out swinger, the ball's going away from goal, so therefore any touch doesn't go where we want it to go. So I just think it's a small tweak like that. I think generally our set pieces are good. I'm not saying they're excellent, but yeah, I think for the level, I think his deliveries are okay. Yeah, can he beat the front man more? Yes, but that's all because he's trying to get it through like a 10 pence piece spot, which is just over the front man's head. Because if you get over the front man's head, then you've got the player there that you want to be there, that hopefully can actually just can then flick it in. So I think there's a reason why he's always aiming for that front post.
And just before we go, we've got one last question. And this one feels pretty relevant for us to answer. Trondheim Hatter asks, will social media podcasters ever stop hating on Gary Sweet? Or is the conspiracy theory that Gary Sweet, some sort of evil overlord, still prevalent amongst podcasters? I mean, I thought that was pretty relevant for us to answer, and I was going to have a quick go at answering that before I come to you guys. I don't think there's a conspiracy theory that Sweet's some sort of evil overlord. I think he's done a brilliant, well, unquestionably done brilliant things for the club, and he's taken us to somewhere we could only dream of. I think the question is over the board, generally over the money they're willing to spend, but you can understand why they don't want to break the bank and go spend beyond our means, which is the saying that's pushed about a lot, isn't it? Also, with the new stadium plans, I think they've got to be careful how much they spend. But I think the areas the spending has been in is probably where the questions are asked, and that's probably why those questions are asked among fans on social media and podcasters in particular. However, I'm not sure there's many club CEOs or chairmen that you'll find in the pub with fans before, after, outside of games. So I think it's pretty unquestionable how much he means to Luton fans, Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, before we answer this sort of question, is we have to just highlight what he's done for the club. I mean, we're all of the age where we grew up through the period where Luton were in the doldrums, and as we've grown up into men, like we've gone on that rise to the Premier League, and that stuck with us. And I think Gary Sweet clearly, alongside the rest of the board, Mick Harford, John Still, Nathan Jones, Rob Edwards, and all the players, alongside all of those, he's obviously played a big part. So I think that's first of all a super important point to make. He's a Luton fan, which I think is rare these days. The grass is never greener. So yeah, there's no conspiracy theory that he's some sort of evil overlord. Certainly from the Egg Red Hatter podcast, who knows from the others. Don't want to speak on behalf of any other podcaster. I mean, I think from my perspective, I think we've challenged, we've constructively criticised, and I think regardless of what anyone achieves in life, they are never immune to that criticism. And I think Gary Sweet would be the first to say himself. I think he said previously at fans forums that he's open to challenge and criticism, as long as it's done in the right way and through the right channels. And I'm sure he would say the same thing on here. And I think, has he made mistakes? Yes. Is anyone perfect? No. Like, making mistakes is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as obviously you learn from them. Like, everyone makes mistakes, and there's an allowance for that. But we are just using our platform to voice our opinions. And I again, speaking on behalf of Oak Road Hatter, I feel like we are authentic. We speak our minds in a polite, constructively critical and challenging way that I think poses questions for others to debate. And like, none of what we say will ever be clickbaity. And if you think we've done that, then feel free to raise it with us, because that's not what we're about. So I think I wouldn't want us to be lumped in with other podcasters in that respect. And yeah, I think we're just using our platform for good. I think we want to speak on behalf of fans. So if someone wants to come on here and speak their voice, more than welcome to. If you want to write for us, you're more than welcome to write for us. And yeah, I think we're just using our platform for good, rather than some sort of conspiracy theory. But no, I would always thank Gary Sweet for what he's done for the club. But like I said, that doesn't make him immune to any challenge when we think that there's something that should be rightfully challenged.
I think just to add to that very briefly, like Jamie hit the nail on the head from my perspective as well. I think that they're not immune to criticism. But I'd never dig out Gary Sweet. I know he's the one that's more public facing, but I would never dig him out alone. My criticism has been of the board as a whole, maybe questions over our ambitions this summer, and obviously maybe over like the start of the season and what's been going on, and who's in charge, things like that. But no one's ever going to forget what they've done for the club. But it doesn't mean that we can't assess it and go, actually, are we still going in the right direction? And ultimately, they're the ones that make the decisions, right? So there's nothing that we say on here that we wouldn't say to them directly. There's nothing we say on here that they're going to sit back and go, oh, actually, yeah, maybe we do need to make this change or spend more money, or like, they're in charge of the they control the club. We don't. So yeah, I don't expect to see Gary Sweet as the next sort of evil Doctor Who or whatever. So yeah, I'm sure he's a nice guy. I've met him a couple of times, and he's always been quite nice. And yeah, no issues at all with him personally.
I mean, that's everything from us today, but there's plenty to discuss there. We'd love to know your thoughts on everything we've talked about. And if you've got questions for us, feel free to send them in, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in every episode. Just before we go, don't forget we've got 3 £25 vouchers for our merch at oakroadhatter.com. To enter, the first chance to enter is subscribe to Oak Road Hatter on YouTube, like and comment on any video published between Sunday the 3rd of November and Friday the 22nd of November. That's the Whole City Preview Pod, which is the one you're listening to right now. So you've not got long to enter. And you've one chance to enter per episode. So if you like and comment on several episodes between those dates, you can multiply your chances of winning. A second chance of entering is following Oak Road Hatter on Twitter or X. Like and repost the competition tweet, which will be pinned to our profile, and tag 3 people in the comments of the post. Finally, with your third chance of entering, place an order between Sunday the 3rd of November and kick off for Luton versus Hull City at 3 p.m. on Saturday the 23rd of November. The more orders you place, the more entries you'll get, and 25% from every order goes to Luton Food Bank. So it's a great cause to be entering and to be ordering these prizes from, and these pieces of merch. And there's some great stuff on there, as we've mentioned. But that's everything from us for today. Thank you from me, thank you from Jamie, and thank you from Adam. And hopefully we've got some positive stuff to talk about on Saturday.